So TJ, we are recording this for the sake of some training content for some agents and whatever we might need, just FYI.
As we start these conversations, I really, talk about the product is how it's an AI for level 1 support. And, how do we break that down? In our world, we break level 1 support down into what we call these 4 pillars. And in these 4 pillars, it's all about, one is the discovery component about it, learning what's on site, what devices are on site, how things are kind of interconnected, etc. The second component about that is monitoring. So once we have a good understanding of how things are interconnected, what devices on there, we learn the environment. And we use our own machine learning models to do things around like fingerprinting devices and their device types in and of themselves, setting a baseline of what we call normal on the site, and just learning how, what devices are on site, what's their source and destination traffic, about how much are they speaking, what destinations are they reaching out to, etc. The third component of that is triage and AI in of itself. So if an incident happens or we see some sort of anomalous behavior, we start to look at why is that occurring. And we look at everything holistically. So, so for example, just thinking of a quick example here, like our services business supports Pete's Coffee and around 300 of their locations around the country today. I can't tell you how many times we see infrastructure fail because somebody wants to just charge their iPhone in the back of a house. They'll unplug a security camera or Wi-Fi AP or the secondary internet. Well, in those type of incidents, Friday immediately kicks into action and it starts going, look, we saw a device failure. Why did that device fail? What's the integrity of the Ethernet cable that was plugging that in? Is it on half duplex? Is there CRCers? Are there things that are happening? What's the status of the upstream switch port? What's the status of the upstream switch of itself? What's the destination that it's been reaching out to, and is that reachable? We go through this list of checks and ultimately perform this level 1 triage root cause analysis. And once we determine what the root cause of the problem is, that's where our 4th pillar comes in, remediation. We take the actionable next steps to try and resolve that problem, whether that means creating a configuration change on the fly, power cycling a device, bouncing a switch port, or doing an escalation of that, and engaging a higher level support agent. We even have something that we call, and we're bringing out of a beta, which we call Friday Boot Camp. And that's the ability to actually engage an on-site resource and walk them through how to troubleshoot and resolve step-by-step an issue that's occurring on site. And it's really geared towards a non-technical audience. So even if you're the most non-technical person out there that doesn't know what a modem is or a wireless AP, Friday will show you pictures of the device and they'll show you where it's located. You'll see that in the demo today and walk you through how to remediate that problem in of itself. Okay. Now, I think what's really interesting about this is we have all the runway in the world to make this much more security centric. And while we are doing security like behavior, like so for example, like if we see anomalous behavior where there's a server on site and we start to see it just upload a bunch of traffic, we don't go power off that device and lose all that forensic data around what's happening. We simply know what upstream switch port it's connected to and shut off the port. And just disconnect it and like kind of quarantine it from the network so it doesn't propagate or cause any other issues. In the meanwhile, that device is still intact where somebody can go on site and resolve it, do whatever they need to do for next steps, or program Friday in to take next steps for them. Right?
Yeah, that's great.
Cool. Okay, so all conceptual, sounds great. Let's pull it up so you can actually see what it looks like. Okay, nice. So I just navigated to the FRIDAYai.io website. If you haven't taken a look, please do. A lot of good context here. It gives a high level of pretty much everything that we've been discussing and some screenshots and our nifty little commercial here.
Yep, I kind of glanced at it before the call.
Nice, nice. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and hit login here in the top right, which is how you log into our Friday front end dashboard. Looks like I'm already logged in, so it immediately brought me into the cloud app here. But right away, you'll notice that I'm presented with 2 views based on my credentials that I have. More of an on-site team view, and then we also have like a more operations, organization health type view into how the organization is performing. It gives in, just a good level overview of what sites are having issues. It gives me some good KPIs in terms of what's my mean time to resolution that Friday is actually resolving problems within. What's my site uptime, my device uptime, and things like that. But I'm just going to go ahead and start with the on-site team view, which gives us direct visibility into exactly everything that's happening on site at a given site, right? Now, this particular org is a hybrid environment. It uses some Meraki, it uses some Cisco. We have some HP servers out there. It's a mixed vendor environment. It truly is, right? And so everything that you're seeing on this page was not entered in via some sort of like management or anything like that. Everything that you're seeing on this page was completely discovered, right? None of this was entered in by a user other than changing this name to Los Alamitos School District, district office, excuse me, with the edit button here, right? That's the only thing that was modified. So, I guess starting there, big differentiator. Monitoring is inherently part of this platform. We don't take the same approach that of what like a Splunk or a SolarWinds or somebody like that would do, where they stand up this central server, build this database. If you have hundreds of sites that are like connecting into this, you're not pointing SNMP to some central IP address, etc., right? Friday is a discovery-based platform. Give you some context here. We had a customer, actually, I just mentioned them. Pete's Coffee was a customer that we support today. They were a SolarWinds shop before we got in there. Took them about 4.5 months to get all 200 plus sites, close to 300 sites rolled out on SolarWinds, stood up. It took them a dedicated resource on site to keep that managed and maintained for when things need RMAs on site, etc. Right? So pretty involved, right? Not to mention the $40,000 of licensing that they're paying to get that, stood up in there. In Friday's environment, when we rolled that out across Pete's Coffee, we discovered and learned all of their sites in a matter of about 6.5 minutes, right? And it's because we're not, like I said, we're not sitting back and pointing all the devices. Friday is all about the integration. We actually speak to the APIs of the infrastructure where we can. And if we have API access, we'll go and discover and probe devices for information as we see fit based on events and things like that, right? So again, Friday is in its current state, all holistic, all around standalone product that's learning, discovering, and getting log and responding to devices should they need to. So right at the top right here, there's a site list view.
Quick question regarding that information. Is it an appliance, a device? Is it cloud native? What are we talking about here? How are you discovering or turning up 300 sites in 6 minutes?
So within Pete's Coffee's environment, they're a Meraki shop that runs a full stack of their environment, right? And so the way we integrate in, it's actually very simple integration. This comes from my days as a Meraki engineer. I'm pretty intimately familiar with the product. But ultimately to integrate, all you do is you add Friday at friday.support as a read-only admin within their organization. As soon as they do that and they're registered in the back end, Friday immediately starts pulling the API and asking a series of hundreds of questions, really. What are all my sites? How are they configured? What devices are on site? How are they interconnected? What switches exist? What are the switch ports? What's the CRC errors? What's the PoE? It goes through a very robust questioning mechanism and gets all that information from the API and starts building it out that way. So in Pete's Coffee's environment, we had their entire network infrastructure and managing it, internet and cloud apps set up in about 6.5 minutes. That's how we did it.
Interesting.
Yep. Now, today, to answer your question around the appliance, we absolutely have an appliance. And so if we're going beyond the realms of a Meraki network, we want to get pretty granular. And this is what allows us to become cross-vendor agnostic, where we can speak to the HP Arubas, the Ciscos, the Fortinets, the Palo Altos, etc. We actually have an appliance on site that probes the environment, collects metadata, secures it, and sends it back via an encrypted tunnel back to our API. And that's how we're presenting this data here on the front end. Based on that data there, you'll notice in a site list, right away, there are several sites that are, ultimately in different statuses here. But you'll notice if a site has the green thumbs up means everything is good. right? Very simple. It means all my site devices are online. All my network devices that were discovered are online and operating within bounds. There are no Ethernet cables occurring. All the remote cloud applications that need to be reached from that site are reachable. My internet is good. No issues with bandwidth, etc. Right? Loss, latency, jitter, all of that looks good, right? If there's a yellow wrench, that means there is an issue occurring. One of those things could be occurring at that site. And if it's a hard red like this site, that means that site is hard down and that site is offline, right? So that means the gateway that was discovered is totally disconnected from the internet and our clients can't reach outbound, right?
Mhm.
So we use those consistently throughout the environment. Now, as I go down the page, you'll notice there's a very simple site status value and internet health value. You know, I put a lot of emphasis on the simplicity of this page because we spent a lot of time trying to make this not look like a technical interface with a bunch of nerd knobs and dials and charts and graphs. We wanted this to be unintimidating for a non-technical user who could simply look at the page and get a really easy view of what's happening at the site. And the site status value is really one component towards that. You know, I can tell you, you know, just if we were at a site working a support help desk, sometimes you get a really ambiguous request come in when somebody's saying, hey, you know, my Wi-Fi just sucks at this site, right? And you're like, okay, what does that even mean, right? What do you mean by it sucks? Is it just one device or all the devices having poor Wi-Fi performance? And us being technical, we know it may have nothing to do with Wi-Fi. Maybe your secondary internet link is offline and the site has half bandwidth, and the perception is because the internet apps are slower, that is the Wi-Fi, right? Well, the site status value here ultimately depicts all of that. And because we have the ability to do triaging in AI and understand root cause analysis, it brings the error that's causing all these other errors to occur on site, and it surfaces that to the top, and it presents it as the site status value. So in this case, Friday's actually determined that there's actually an Ethernet cable issue occurring at this site. And I can expand this and get some more context around this environment. I can see, here's the switch that's actually experiencing the issue. And I can see that there's an unknown device that's actually plugged into it, and that's related to this incident. That's actually experiencing probably degradation due to this issue that's occurring, right? So more to come on that. I'll click on all of these so you can see that. We do the same thing with the internet health. We keep it very simple. Is it reachable? Is it healthy? If it is, just show the green environment and green status if everything's good. If you want more context, you can expand that and get more information around the internet health. You know, you'll notice site bandwidth is captured here. You'll notice in this case where this school is going Orange County Department of Education, but this is their ISP. Friday has the ability to learn the ISP. Why is that important? Because we can tell an environment if an internet outage is occurring. We can say it's actually related to the ISP based on geography-based outages, or if it's actually an issue that's occurring on site that's causing the internet to be offline, right? Loss, latency, and jitter, definitely relevant, especially in voice environments where these are key variables to a good voice quality and environment. And then all of the cloud applications which are being monitored from the perspective of this site. So, you know, if I have some applications that are being hosted in AWS or just a cloud app or whatever it might be, you'll see the reachability and the connectivity from the perspective of this site. And if anything starts to become degraded or just offline, you'll know it's not the issue or an IT issue that's happening on site. It's actually related to the cloud app, and that one cloud app is offline in and of itself. You receive an alert or an action, whatever it might be, right? And again, right, very simple up view. You can drill into it, get more information. I can drill into this even further and get more specific details around loss, latency, and jitter if I needed to, right? So all good stuff. Okay. Going down the page here, you'll notice that my site network environment was fully discovered. You notice there's obviously internet connection here, a firewall exists, there's a wired network where there's switches that exist, wireless APs exist here, right? And I can click into these components, which I will here in a moment, but there are also the site devices that were all discovered here in of themselves, by themselves as well, right? And so let's talk about these for a second. How is Friday going and discovering this environment? The quick answer is initially it ultimately understands the subnet that it's sitting in. It discovers all of the IP addresses by doing a quick ping sweep. And because we know which devices are learning to pings, it's not only pings, by the way, we're looking at ARP data as well. We know devices don't all respond to pings, so it's not just ping. But we're looking at data and we can see which ports a device is actually responding to. Based on all the information and the devices that are responding and the ports that they're responding on, we bounce traffic off of those devices. And we look at things like their response, we look at response times, we look at things like HTTP GET header information, and we can say, look, this device, it's responding back as an iPad or an iPhone or a server or a Windows workstation or, a fire alarm, etc. right? You ultimately Friday can go about fingerprinting these devices based on how they're behaving and responding on the environment. And that's how we start to collect this data and fingerprint it accordingly, right? So, in this case, you can see there's about like 200 devices in this site. Could be kind of cumbersome, especially if I want to weave through all of these devices. So we allow the user to chop it up and sort it very easily. You can sort based on IP address. 168, you can search based on a device name. You can search based on a device type, let's say IP speakers, right? So you can quickly narrow down, and I can also filter on this information and kind of just group things together, right? So I can group based on vendor, which Friday discovers. Vendor is very important. I can group based on the operating system that Friday's discovered on devices or device types themselves. Let's just group it on device types. I can see all of my device types as I scroll down this list. So we see some battery backups, some cameras, IP features, some NAS devices, servers, switches, etc. right? Mm-hmm. And so you can see how this is gathering information. I can also click down into any given device. Let's just pick this one, .150. And I'll see some very relevant information on a device specifically. You can see it's actually a UPS. I can see the vendor. If there's an OS to it, it's great. I can see the upstream device that it's connected to. In this case, it's connected via Ethernet. It's not a wireless device. I can see it's plugged into port 1045, right? I can even assign what we call Friday smart outlets to these devices. And by assigning a smart outlet to a device, I can remotely power on and power off devices from anywhere really in the world that I'm sitting at, which is huge. And while that's great for remote powering and unpowering devices, what makes this really cool and really powerful is I can put it into what we call an incident response flow, where we can say things like, look, if this device becomes unreachable for 5 minutes or 7 minutes or 20 minutes, try power cycling it and see if that actually resolves it. If that does not resolve it, capture all of that information, capture all those details and the steps we've taken to try and resolve that, and perform that in an escalation event in a support ticket to a level 2 support and send that to whoever we may need to, right? And then obviously the device alerts all the activity of what's happening with this specific device over time, right? Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, so great high-level visibility on the device type, what it's learned, some site devices. Let's take a look at the wired network, because this is certainly important. The device is very locked down. Everything that's sent back to us is encrypted data all the way from the point where it's captured through our tunnel, and even the point where it's stored within our database, right? So in the event that something was captured, or let's say that we even had a data breach across all our layers of security that are laid on it, they'd be literally getting gobbledygook because it's all encrypted data and the way we're storing it. So none of that at any time, even if it were me, I would not have access to that information via our database. It's just completely locked down, right? We should certainly have a longer conversation on that though.
Yeah. I just wondered like what type of protocol that you guys are using in order to extract that data. But yeah, that's more of a security question. I'm picking up what you're putting down though.
Cool. Great. Cool. So I'm just going into the wired network page here. You'll notice, we've discovered a bunch of different switches. A lot of these are Cisco switches. You notice there's a Meraki switch here. So, I don't think the site has any HP switches, but ultimately you'll notice these are the switches we've seen. It highlights the switches that actually have issues on them. I can actually expand this. And not only does it show me actual real-time port information of the device, it also shows me exactly which devices and which ports they're plugged into in the environment, right? Really helpful, not only for taking next steps and understanding root cause and physical layer 1 issues, but also when you have a closet that's complete spaghetti and you have no idea what's plugged into, great view into what's happening at a site by simply seeing it. If I hover over a port, I can quickly get some device level details on that device itself. I can even get some port level details in terms of what Friday's learning from the API or NIP itself as well, right? So CRC.
PJ, does that get any bigger or is it as large as it?
On my screen, it's as large as we can go, but I can zoom
Okay,
in.
no problem.
Yeah.
No, that for the sake of the video, I wanted to see if we could just get a little more detail. Thanks.
Totally. Yep. Cool. Notice we're also pulling in some actual device information. So model numbers, I can expand this in. We know the model numbers of this switch stack, right? We know the serial numbers of the switch stack, MAC, vendor, etc. Host names are also discovered dynamically. So how are we getting this information? SNMP could certainly be one way, but in reality, what we actually prefer to do is we have the ability to actually take in credentials of a device directly. And what we can do is if we enter in local credentials, a user can type in its username and password. Friday uses these credentials and actually probes the device, getting various show commands via the CLI, and actually is able to extract that information and show it over here on what we're seeing on things like this, the vendor, the switch information, etc. It certainly can do show commands, but in the event of a security incident, or in the event of like a cable testing or like bouncing a port, if we get right level access to it, we can make configuration changes to a device should we need to, and actually gather information more or be responsive and maybe bounce a port or shut a port down, whatever we may need to on a device. So when we engage, we typically ask for them to create us credentials based on a privilege level on how we engage in the environment. So if they have sort of like central server or radius, they usually just create us credentials.
Okay.
But as people are getting more comfortable with it, they give us higher level privileges so we can perform certain tasks.
Got it. And what about like, are you guys using MFA, multi-factor authentication, anything like that?
Oh, yeah, yes, we are. We're actually just rolling out a Twilio 2FA right now on this.
Mhm.
Some of the feedback that we're getting and some things that folks are asking for is, can we set thresholds and be informed and approve actions to occur before Friday actually takes those actions on a switch? So
Sure.
for example, let's say somebody determines there's an issue, there's a specific port that needs to be power cycled. After 5 minutes, reach out to somebody and get approval for that. If they don't approve in 5 minutes, then just proceed with the thing after like 30 minutes or something like that, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
So those are the type of questions that we're getting, and we're working through that now. Cool. All right. So I think we get a pretty good sense of the site level view. I can certainly show you a site that looks healthy, just so we can see what it looks like. Right. So internet's good. Site status, everything looks good. We have something that we're working through on this firewall page for this customer. So it's showing the alerting state, but that's to be determined. And then, yeah, good stuff here. So one question someone may ask is, okay, well, if the site is good and these devices are offline, why is the site showing good? Well, it's because this device is disabled. You notice the alert is with a crossbow through it. This device is being ignored for now, if you will, right?
Mhm.
So quick blurb on alerting. By default, when we throw in a device into an environment, we ask for the appliance to be plugged in at the head end, typically on its MDF or a core switch, or in the firewall itself via a trunk port. And ultimately, you know, we look at the environment from a layer 2 and layer 3 perspective, right? We need to see both environments. So if we need to monitor across different networks or VLANs, the Friday appliance supports sub interfaces on them. So let's say we currently are sitting on a management VLAN and we want to monitor another VLAN. Let's say it's a PCI VLAN or a secure VLAN or, some sort of high secure VLAN. You simply create another sub interface on the appliance and you just add the subnet of the VLAN that you want to monitor. And that's it. Friday takes it from there and starts monitoring that. Yeah. Okay, cool. So the reason why I bring that up is because by default, when you plug that appliance in for the first 24 hours, you'll see a banner at the top that comes in and says stealth mode activated. By default, Friday sits in stealth mode, which means it's passively just learning the environment. It's not taking any actions. It's not triggering any incident response flows. It's not sending any alerts. It's simply learning the environment and collecting information one way, right, to learn. Okay, so site status view. Let's take a look at the other view here, the organization view or the operations view as we were looking at it before. I'll click on the operations view here. And this page, as mentioned, this was made to give a very good high-level view of what the site health looks like or the organization health looks like at a glance. So you'll see very easily 8 sites, no issues, 4 sites actually have issues, and 0 sites are currently offline, right? I can actually click into this and get more context, but I want to go down to some of these KPIs real quick that we quantify that make things look really easy. So right now we're at 2 hours, just looking at the last 2 hours, site uptime, pretty straightforward, 100%. Average mean time to resolution. So you can see there's a lot of activity occurring here, especially in the last 2 hours where we have 151 incidents. But look at our mean time to resolution. It's very, very tight, right? It's like, in a traditional environment for incidents that we're having, you're not going to see a human responding to these type of incidents for a mean time to resolution on things like that. To give you some more context on this, when we introduced this to Pete's Coffee, their mean time to resolution at their organization was upwards of 4 days to get things resolved. After Friday and having it sit in their environment for about a month or so, we shrunk their mean time to resolution from about 4.5 days to about an hour and a half. And it was noticeably different with their site uptime, their ability to accept credit cards and process order ahead type applications, and ultimately keep their sites online and uptime is functioning as fast as possible. I can actually click into this. I'm going to click into this even more. I can click into this and see every single incident that Friday's discovering and how fast it took to kind of get that issue resolved and brought back online from the moment it occurred to the point it actually got resolved, right? So in their environment, a lot of down device issues. In other environments, you see a lot of internet issues. In other environments, you see malware detected. You see security type events occurring, all of which we're gathering that information directly from the firewall while we're probing it and getting their security level type of information from it themselves. Okay. Yeah, and I'd say for the most part, I think that's a good overview. I mentioned I was going to click on this, so I should show this. Let me bring this up. For some customers, a map view makes a lot of sense where they can see all of their sites within a certain geography. Like a Pete's Coffees of the world, seeing a geography-based view of all their sites is certainly helpful, especially if we're having geography-based outages. But I can, very easily interact with this. I can zoom down into a majority of where the sites are. Keep in mind, by the way, like a user didn't go in here and enter in all these address information. We simply pulled the Meraki API and pulled all that data here. So no one's coming back and administering this and entering all this data here manually.
Yeah. So when a new server comes online or a new IP comes online, you automatically detect.
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll know what site that server came online from and apply that information to that device there. So to clarify, let's say if we want to monitor site devices, we have our appliance on site, right? Okay. So if we're talking about a scope being where we just want to manage and monitor a Meraki network and take all the self-remediation and action on that, we can do that via the API. But if we
Okay.
want to be more robust on a site level and monitor IoT devices, monitor cloud apps, look for cable errors and things like that, our appliance has to be on site, right?
Okay.
To answer your question, how does that look like? When a new site, let's say Pete spins up a new site, we can either ship them an appliance, which is the size of like an Apple TV. Think of that as a form factor here.
Mhm.
Somebody literally just plugs it into their firewall and a port that's been offed already, a trunk port, and done. Friday literally takes it from there.
Cool.
Yeah.
I watched it happen. So in our last and we're running over time, but in the last maybe 2 minutes, TJ, can you describe, just because it hasn't been done on this call, an incident response flow for, let's say, IP speaker, refrigerator, or something offline in from the incident response to the resolution, if somebody wasn't being alerted on site to fix it? Like, where would that be in the process, and just what happens? So let's say, shutting down the port or whatever it is. If you could just describe that quickly,
Absolutely. Yeah.
that would be good. Okay.
And so we're talking about IR flows here. I think ultimately what Maria is alluding to. But let's just bring it up here, right? And so this comes down to the question I was ultimately asking in the beginning is, if you onboard a customer today, how do we define out certain parameters of issues they're having? And do they stay on top of you? What are their expectations of you to getting it resolved? And what are your expectations of them to getting it resolved? So in our world, right, Friday has the ability to automate process flows depending on certain events that are occurring. So let's say we have a specific device that we want to take action on. We can certainly do it based on groups of devices. Like, let's say we want to put a policy in for all IP speakers that are discovered on site and want to perform an action if it goes offline. We can certainly do that. But in our case, in this scenario here, I'm going to pick a very specific device that I want to take action on. So let's say I choose device type as the issue type. I can say the site that's in question. It's loading all the sites that are actually relevant to a specific site here. I can choose the device in question in which I want to trigger a response on. Let's just say it's this device here. What's the device type issue? In this case, because it's an IP speaker, let's say if the speaker goes offline, right? Now, these issues actually change depending on the device type that we're choosing and also the customer profile. For this example, let's say if this device goes offline, what's the action I'm taking? In this case, I can send an email alert where it will document all the information. I can choose what email I want to send it to, what the subject of that email should be, and the body of that email. I can send a text message alert where you type in the phone number and the SMS body. I can actually, if there's a smart outlet assigned to that device, I can choose to power cycle the device. If it's plugged into a PoE port, I can choose to bounce the port, right? Whatever it might be. Ultimately, we're defining an action and a fault, an issue and an action type in scenario in which we can respond to a given incident. And we can say, look, in this case, if this device at Hopkins Elementary goes offline, send a text message alert to, some phone number and say we can use variables, device type at site name is offline and went offline at time occurred, right? So on and so forth. Very simple text message there, right? Mm-hmm. So and that in this case, this IR flow will just notify maybe somebody on site. It could be more just notification message sites saying something like, we have customers that have said, look, if an incident happens, we want the site to be aware that the incident is happening. And just by doing that, that prevents a support ticket from coming in the first place. So we have customers that have IR flows that said, if an AP goes offline at a site, notify the site. And this IR flow says something like, hey, you know, site 123, we are aware you're having a Wi-Fi problem. We're fixing it. Here's the ticket number. We'll get back to you once it gets resolved. Think about what that does for the dynamic of the site. Nobody's running to the phone or send an email to open a support ticket when there's a line going out the window, right? They know that the support incident case is all over it, and there's issues being taken to get that resolved. That issue resolved via the steps they're taking, right?
Yeah.
So lots of
quick question. This, you have to go through each IP and set up this information in order to get an alert? Is that something that's down?
I certainly don't. So let's say this is an IP speaker. Let's say I choose device type. What site do I want this to be? Let's say all sites. What's the device type that I'm in question of? Let's say it's an IP speaker. What's the issue? Goes offline. What's the action? Send a text message. Now, for every IP speaker that goes off in any of these sites, it can trigger that flow.
Okay. Are you guys configuring this, or is the customer configuring this?
Typically, the customer would do it, but as an engagement, we work with them to set up some IR flows just so they can get a feel for it. But it's very user friendly, as you can see. I mean, it's literally filling out a form in an action response the way they want to set it up.
Thanks, TJ. That was helpful.
So TJ, quick question regarding where this can be installed. Colos, data centers, are we monitoring cloud infrastructure? What are we doing? I think you mentioned something about cloud, but
yeah. So all of those are certainly relevant environments. The sweet spot for Friday today is any customer that has multiple distributed sites with a lean IT staff team. So retail, hospitality, education, healthcare, you know, all of those kind of fit that mold. But we do operate within office environments. Absolutely, right? We have one of these appliances at customers' district office or headquarters all the time. Yeah. Manufacturing plants is one that could be popular too, where a warehouse type environment is certainly relevant, right? Yeah.
No, I'm seeing a lot of customers that are, you know, either colos, you know, in a colo, have an IaaS infrastructure or, you know, just pure SaaS, pure cloud environments nowadays. So wondering how that all gets put into into your devices, right? And also, you know, the beautiful thing about COVID, everybody's now working from home, right? So device types are now geographically spread over the place. So how are you guys managing all that?
Yeah, so very true, right? Like we see that a lot too. And, you know, it's kind of reverting right now, but every organization is going to be different. So let's say we have an environment where everybody works remote, you know, and everybody's sitting remote outside, or like you said, they're 100% cloud. Well, their ability to reach the cloud is really what's critical here, right? So what's the integrity of the internet? If it's up, is it actually usable? And does it not have a bunch of like loss latency jitter on the link, like a lot of commodity internet circuits are? But assuming even that's good, then what are the cloud apps that they're using, right? And so in this scenario, we have 3 of them defined. In this case, these are 3 remote cloud apps. Having the ability to know that those are reachable from the site that the user is relevant to, right? That's where this starts to become really impactful, because not only are you looking at reachability, but you're looking at loss latency and jitter and so on and so forth. Or like, you know, if I'm able to reach Google, why can't I reach Office 365, for example, which is a cloud app, right? Having some insight there that's saying, look, this is not the internet. This is not an issue that you're having. This is not an issue with your laptop, computer, workstation. This application is affected, it's degraded, and it's offline to everybody.
And just out of curiosity, does that require VPN connectivity from the user that's working at home?
No, it does not. So in this case, it's an appliance that's just local to where they are, right? And
okay. So for example, if let me just back up here. So let's say let's say I've got, I don't know, 200 users, right? And all remote workforce, we all work at home. Yeah, we got some presence in, AWS, right? That's where our infrastructure lies.
Yeah.
Our users are all working from their home offices. Would you send an appliance to each person's home office?
Yeah, I mean, that would get really costly real quick. It's actually what you said. Yeah, they're dialing back in via VPN or phoning home and then going out from the site from there.
Yeah. So you require some sort of VPN connectivity in order to see if their device is uptime.
Not necessarily, right? And this is mostly focused towards not really the home office type environment, more towards the office, remote location, Soho type offices. So in your scenario, let's say everyone's sitting remote, but they dial into VPN so that they can get access to applications in a secure manner, right?
Got it.
The appliance would sit at the place that they're phoning home into via VPNing into.
Got it. Okay.
Quick note on that. We don't have to have a physical appliance. If the customer has a virtualized environment, we have a virtualized version of our appliance that we can actually work with them on.
Okay.
Right? So even these remote locations, if they have a virtual anything that we can sit on, you can put our image on it.
Thanks for letting us do the demo for you. I will follow up with you later.
Yeah, give me a call. Thanks,
Great.
guys.
Mike,
Appreciate it.
Thank you,
great
Mike.
questions. Thank you for
Good
that.
stuff.
Nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you.